One of the strangest of all the ancient Greek gods has to be Pan. Not one of the well-known 12 Olympian gods, Pan was associated with Arcadia, a rustic backwater in ancient Greece that was the setting for many pastoral poems. The most familiar myths about Pan involve his failed pursuits of nymphs. Pitys got away by being transformed into a pine tree. Syrinx was transformed into a reed by a river's edge. Pan then plucked the reeds, joined them with wax, and invented the Pan pipe. His one success came when he seduced the moon by bringing her wool. Pan was the rustic god. Rather than grand classical temples, his shrines were typically located in local caves or grottos. Associated with both shepherds and hunters, ancient Arcadians would ritualistically scourge statues of him when their hunts were unsuccessful. When he competed against the more sophisticated Apollo in a musical contest, not only did he lose, the only judge to vote in his favor, Midas, had his ears turned into those of a donkey, to symbolize his lack of sophisticated taste. If Pan could be a god of fun and pleasant song, he could also be menacing, instilling in his enemies panic and terror. It was said that Pan was seen on the battlefield at Marathon, causing the Persians to break ranks and flee, to be slaughtered by the Athenians. Of course, Greek mythology had no set dogma or orthodoxy, and perceptions of the gods changed over the centuries. Later Orphic poets, focusing on Pan's name meaning all in Greek, elevated this earthly god to cosmic proportions. This aspect of the god was very popular among Neoplatonists and early modern philosophers. During the reign of Tiberius, a boat full of people reportedly heard a voice in the wind reporting that Pan had died. Other ancient gods such as Osiris were said to have died and been resurrected in new forms, but Pan was unique in simply dying. Later Christian writers made much of this strange event, and associated it with Jesus' death and resurrection, and his final triumph over what they considered the demons, not gods, of the Greek world. In his book, Pan, the Great God's Modern Return, Paul Robichaud follows the reception of Pan across history in Western art and literature, noting which elements of Pan's varied nature inspired artists across time. Though his survey ranges across European art and music, given the author is an English professor, the major focus of this book is understandably on English literature from the 17th century to World War II. Writers and poets such as Dryden, Shelley, D.H. Lawrence, Walter de la Mare, Saki and Arthur Machen feature prominently. Pan's closeness to nature could be used for everything from Dryden's idea that England was in a degraded condition during the exile of its true king, to various 19th century poets growing alarm at the industrialized destruction of the natural world, but Richard considers the years just prior to World War I as the real golden age of Pan in English literature, especially in children's literature. And the section of Kenneth Grahame's book, The Wind in the Willows, in which Pan appears receives particularly detailed attention. One of the most distinctive things about Pan is his goat-like appearance. Early Attic pottery depicted Pan with a human body and a goat's head, but more usually he has been shown to have a shaggily hairy human body with goat's legs and horns. Either way, this part man, part animal form was unusual among major Greek gods. Richard's discussions of the relationship between Pan and modern depictions of the devil is interesting because of how recent that relationship is. Medieval depictions of Satan usually depict him as serpent-like, or with a collection of various animal parts, and it was only in the last 150 years, with the rise of occultism and Wiccanism, that the Panish devil really took hold of the public imagination. Richard points to two specific pieces of art: Elisha's Levi's, Pantheos, and the goat pentagram included in Stanislas de Guaida's 1897 book, The Key to Black Magic, as major contributors to this association. Occultist Aleister Crowley and anthropologist Margaret Murray also helped popularize the idea that early Christians had sought to undermine Pan's sexual and hedonistic appeal by associating him with ultimate evil. At this point I must note that unfortunately, this book is not available on Audible. This is a shame because the subject matter is ideally suited to a multimedia experience. Robichaud references many different paintings featuring Pan, but only a few of those mentioned are reproduced in the book. Some of my favorites are the humorous Dissonance by Franz von Stuck, which depicts Pan enduring a small faun's attempt to play his pipes, and the more unsettling Altar of Pan by Rosaline Norton. For me, the reading experience would have flowed much better if I could have listened along while simultaneously searching the paintings referenced on my iPad. Similarly, it would be helpful if this hypothetical audio version could include clips of the various musical pieces, operas, etc., that are described in the book. The final section, giving a brief overview of Pan's appearances in popular culture post-World War II, is the most underdeveloped part of the book. He mentions some interestingly obscure occurrences, such as a brief comic story by Steve Ditko and Stan Lee, the future creators of Spider-Man, but doesn't do much more than explain the rather silly plot. Pan makes an obnoxious know-it-all lose his hair after he disrespects a painting of the god. As goofy as that comic is, it's slightly comical, slightly sinister. Pan seems to me to be truer to the spirit of the ancient god than the attempts in the early 20th century to associate him with Satan. Still, what this book proves is that Pan is such an interesting subject that artists have been able to depict him as the devil, to a Christ-like figure in the work of Rabelais, to everything in between. Pan was a god of a specific locality and time, but his various contradictions, sometimes comic, sometimes terrifying, sometimes local, sometimes all-encompassing, friend to shepherds, but dangerous to them if disturbed during his noontime naps, has allowed him to remain of interest to artists despite the frequent changes of taste and ideology over time. Be sure to like and subscribe for more book reviews.